Peace, this is Son Michaud, your Gullah teacher at Harvard University, and today I'm talking to you about how vocal inflection can change the meanings of words and distinguish one from another in the Gullah language, even when they sound virtually identical to the ear of non-native speakers. For example, can't and can both sound like can. You can do that? Yeah, I can. They both sound the same, but it's the inflection that makes the difference between whether or not you're establishing a negative or a positive. Same thing with B-E-N-T, B-E-N-D, B-E-E-N, all sound like ben. Now, depending on the region you're in, ben for B-E-E-N may sound like bun. So instead of I been tell him boy, you might hear I bun tell him boy, but they both essentially mean B-E-E-N. And same thing with B-E-N-T and B-E-N-D, who ban that up? I could band that up, or boy, I'm gonna make me band you up round ya. Those are all basically saying bend and bent. And even in the past tense, when you're establishing past tense, it's not necessary to say bent or bend to distinguish the two, because the bend and the context of the sentence basically establish to the speaker, another native speaker, what it is that you mean. It's all in the vocal inflection, it's all in the way that you say it, and giving context clues to the listener, especially if this is a person who's familiar with the language. They essentially know what you mean based on the way that you say it, not just what you say. And that's very, very important to the Gullah language, is vocal inflection is everything. It can be the difference between, again, establishing a positive and a negative. So if someone is saying, asking for permission to do something, and you say, yeah, you can do that, and no, you can't do that. Essentially, they both sound the same, so you would need to know can as in cannot, or can as in can, like what you want me to do. In either case, using context clues and vocal inflection makes all the difference in the world in Gullah, and just try that. I've had people who aren't familiar with Gullah sometimes ask me again to reaffirm whether or not I wanted them to do something or not, because in many times I've said words that to them were redundant, but to me were saying two completely different things. Like, and I tell you, you can't do it? So was that you telling me that I could or could not? They were confused. Now, someone who is speaking Gullah would know that what I mean is, did I not tell you that you cannot do the thing that you are now attempting to do? See? Vocal inflection makes all the difference in the world, and that's one of the beautiful things that I love about this language, is even though it's an oral language first, because of that fact, not all of this will translate well into writing. And so if I were trying to establish a positive or negative without the aid of the T at the end of can't, I would probably double up the A in the spelling, or perhaps double up the N, depending on what registers as elongating that sound, that can sound. Now, also, I should mention, same as with Ben, where B-E-E-N can be pronounced bun or ben, there's also, depending on the region, sometimes a Y sound between the K and the A for can and can't. So what you would end up with is a can and a can, and both mean can't or cannot, can or cannot, but it's that yeah sound in between the two that you hear often in, say, Jamaican patois. Something similar happens in Gullah as well, often between the consonant and the vowel A. So you would end up like gal for gal, or can for can, or can for can't. Both happens in both Gullah and patois and some of the other Creoles as well, Creole languages as well, but I digress. In instances where these words sound very similar to one another, you're relying on inflection and you're relying on tone, the phonetics, in order to be able to convey what these words mean. And it works best when you're speaking with someone who's either a native speaker of that language or someone who speaks a language, particularly a Creole language, that is a cousin of the language of which you speak, to be able to understand more clearly what it is you mean when you're using different words in the same sentence that sound the same but mean different things. Does it make sense? Give it a try and see what you mean. See how it feels. Try using can and cannot, or ben, bent, ben in sentences, and see how they feel rolling off your tongue. And this is, of course, for non-Gullah speakers or non-native Gullah speakers who are just trying to get familiar with the language. These are some good places to start in order to familiarize you with a more native sounding Gullah. This is me code switching, by the way. I don't typically sound this way. I sound more like this, yeah. But for purpose of you understanding what I mean and being able to make the distinction between the two, give it a try. See if you can do it. See? All right. That's me for right now, and I hope you had a good time listening. And check out for my next video, and I'll bring you something new. Okay. In the meantime, we out, chat.